Welcome everyone. Thumbs up. You're with me. Wiggle a finger. Yes. Wonderful. Welcome everyone. This is our third session for Collab Fest. We're kicking off today and we are deep diving and are super keen to learn more about collaboration in this distributed world we're working in. So while we're settling in, I'm coming at you with a hot start. And so my question is, how comfortable are you receiving critique in general? Very comfortable, very uncomfortable. Place yourself on the scale. Yes, all you have to do is hover over the flashcard and stamp your choice. Okay, so I see that the level of comfortableness in the room is very high. That's goodwill for what we have planned. I like a lot of critique today coming your way. So it's good that you're comfortable. This music you're hearing, the volume can be managed individually, so feel free to play with that volume louder or smoother. Exactly, Diksha, you've got it, you found it. Then, let's move over to the next part. How comfortable are you giving critique? I'm curious to see if something changes here. Or do we feel more comfortable receiving it or giving it? All right. Okay, I see we're shifting slowly towards, I'm not as comfortable giving it. I think I rather prefer receiving critique. That's an interesting thought. Let's see what we do with that during today's session. All right. And Will is going to drop a lot of goodies, insights, wisdom bombs at us. So if you are taking those learnings away and sharing them on social media, Twitter and LinkedIn, make sure that you use the hashtag CollabFest 2022 and tag us. And we have teamed up with the wonderful folks from Design Matters, a 2-day conference for designers. And we're giving away 20 free live stream tickets at the end of today. So share your learnings from today's session and enter the raffle. So with no further ado, thanks so much for playing along. And also super keen to hear if you are in Butter for the very first time ever right now. Let me know. I want to see who here has never attended a Butter session before. You're finding the poll on the left side of the screen. Click your name and then hit submit response. And while you do that, I am killing the music here, although the vibes are really something today. But I want to take the opportunity to welcome Will and to tell you a bit about him and introduce him properly. So he is a senior designer at Metal Studio, which is a design and development agency rooted in a love for making things. They're building things, they're making things. He has also held visiting lecturer roles at the Royal College of Art, Loughborough University, I'm sure I pronounced that wrong, but you get to correct me in a second, Will, and the Brunel University. Today, Will leads teams that create brilliant digital products across a variety of complex domains. And much of his time is spent bringing order to chaos. Whether that is unearthing insights during UX research or building robust UA design systems or facilitating creative workshops to break new ground. That all sounds fabulous, Will. Thank you so much for being with us today. Take it away.
Thanks, Anna Maria. It's great to be here. I almost want that music to keep playing to keep me going through the next 35 minutes.
I know.
But yeah, I'm just going to dive straight into it. I'm going to dive straight into it. That was a great introduction. I've never been introduced before, so that was wonderful and lovely to hear. Good stuff. Awesome. So, I am indeed Will. I'm a senior designer at Metal Studio, and I am here essentially to complain and rant about why I don't care if you like it. I'm not going to spend the next 35 minutes ranting about that in its entirety. I'm probably going to spend about 7 minutes ranting about that, but then we're going to dive into some top tips around giving and receiving critique and what that means for us. Got a bit of a fun game in the middle for us to play and to give my voice a chance to rest halfway through. But I'm sure we're all kind of familiar with these situations. We're in critiques. Maybe we were at university. Maybe it's in our day-to-day roles. No matter what kind of our roles are, feedback is often a big, important part of what we do across all kinds of different sectors and industries. I myself in digital design. I know we've got other digital designers, product designers, industrial designers on the call today. I'm hoping these tips and tricks will feed across all of your different roles. But we've all been there, you know, we've kind of presented bits and pieces of our work to our teams. Maybe it's early stage, maybe it's late stage, but then we've kind of had a flurry of feedback that might be around people loving what we're doing, liking all the work that we've produced, making us feel good, telling us that things are great. And you know what, I do this all the time. You know, I'd love to know if it resonates with you guys through the reactions. I do it all the time myself. I am definitely kind of falling foul of my own dislikes and getting frustrated with myself. But you know, this is a common thing. But I want to explain why I don't care if you like it. Okay, all right. You know, it does make us feel good. It is nice to know that the work we've done is being received well. We all want to be liked. It's kind of part of human nature. And I don't want to take away from that. I don't want us to exist in a world where we're not being praised for good work. I'm not here to suggest we take that away. But I think often when we're kind of in situations where we've received maybe quite general positive feedback, it can leave us feeling a little bit lost. It's great in the moment. We feel buoyed. We feel kind of energized. But actually, when we go away from maybe a feedback session, or we've kind of read and received it asynchronously, we don't really know what to do with it. Like where do we go? Great, my team like it, but how do we go from there? How do we move the project or the work forward? How do we progress? And then things can kind of go from bad to worse in some situations. Suddenly something gets pushed in front of clients, or worse, I would say, gets in front of users, and you're not met with a chorus of love anymore. Instead, you find frustration or anger. You know, features aren't delivering the value that customers need. You haven't met the client's expectations. Ultimately, you might not be delivering value to those who are seeking it from you in your role, whether that's internally or externally. And that's why I really don't care if you like it. I don't really care, and I don't think we should care about this kind of high level but very vague kinds of feedback, as uplifting as it might be. I'm not here for it. You'll find that lots of what I say in today's talk is maybe quite provocative. I want to provoke some reactions in you and some different opinions in you. And I'm hoping this kind of big question of not caring whether or not your team likes the work you're doing is something that resonates or you think is very important. But like I said, yeah, I think it is a very natural thing for us to do. It's a very natural response. We see something, we might like it. That might be the first thing that comes to mind. So we want to say it. But I think we also say it for a whole bunch of other reasons, particularly when it comes to feedback sessions and critique sessions. And I've got 4 hypotheses around why that might be. The first one, and I think almost the most permissible one, if you will, is that often it's a proxy. It's a different way for us to say that we think the work has merit. We think the work is delivering on all that it needs to deliver. I think my creative director, Alex, might be on this call, and this is kind of the conversation I had with him well over a year ago when I started thinking about this kind of topic and wanting to share my fairly, I guess, divisive thoughts on it. And he said that often, you know, he says it because he thinks something has merit. And I think that's good when you're working with a team that you trust, when you're working with a team that is kind of very close to the heart of the problem, the heart of the challenge, the heart of the project. And you kind of trust that they understand the context, the requirements, and the process of the work, that actually this feedback can be quite useful, right? We're saying that whatever you've done, we think it has merit because we understand the project inside out. But I would also argue that often you can't rely on that. Not everyone, even if they're in your kind of the same business as you or even the same industry as you, you can't rely on the fact that they have all of this knowledge. And the same knowledge that you do, or the closer team does. And at any rate, I think saying that you like something simply falls short of giving you any fuel to push the project further. I think the second option is that actually sometimes we're just a bit disengaged, or dare I say lazy. I think often disengaged. Maybe we've got too much going on. Maybe we can't. You know, we've joined a feedback session, but we don't really have the time for it. Or maybe the work might have been poorly presented, and so we default to saying something like "I like it" or "This is great," or kind of any of those general pleasantries, because yes, we want to make the creators of the work feel good, but also we're kind of dodging the bullet on having to provide any insight or critical detail. Option 3, I see this quite a lot in universities. And with students kind of up and down the education ladder, is that actually we're just afraid of upsetting people. We're never quite sure how our feedback might be taken. If we want to say something that we think is incredibly important but could come across as somewhat negative, then we're just, we don't want to upset the person who's presented to us. We don't want to derail anyone from what they're doing. And so again, we kind of default to saying that we like it. We try and avoid the conflict, and we say it, and we just move on and hope that someone else in the room is going to air their honest and candid thoughts. I think the last reason we do it, I think, is often a lot of people just don't know, or they don't feel confident in giving critique. Certainly from my experience through schooling, through universities, and even in some of the early roles I had, you're not taught how to give feedback particularly. Certainly not in the UK, from my own experience. And so if we don't know how to frame it, if we don't know how to give constructive critique, then we just don't. We think that saying that you love something is delivering all that you need to do. I can see lots of reacts coming in throughout all of this. And so it's great to see that it's resonating with you. I know there aren't any angry reacts, but feel free to pop some of those in the chat if you vehemently disagree with me. I can see Jacob looking angry at me from his window. I think ultimately all 4 of these situations are incredibly understandable. I do it myself. I've experienced all of these. But I think together we can do better. And I really hope that kind of leaving today's talk, that we can collectively say, we don't care if you like it, and now we've learned some tips and tricks to get us away from giving this general feedback and into giving and receiving feedback in a much more constructive way. That's kind of the end of my evangelizing slot around why I still don't care if you like it. So if you come up to me after this talk and say, "Hey, Will, loved your talk today," thanks. It's going to make me feel good, but I'm gonna push you for more, and you'll see that in these tips. So sort of moving into the road to better critique, as I've called it. Often when I'm talking to anyone about critique, I like to reference someone called Mitch Goldstein. He's a designer, artist, educator, based in the US, and I came across his kind of work and writings on critique when I was a student, and it's something I've carried forward with me since. And so when I'm talking about critique, I'm often framing it in this way. So this is all about critique being there to serve the work and improve the work, not the person who made the work. But the thing I really want to highlight here is that a critique of your work is not a critique of your humanity. Making bad work or making work that doesn't resonate with people doesn't make you a bad person. And for me, this the biggest thing that I have to try and encourage, particularly students, but other, colleagues, other people in the industry, peers, to kind of overcome. Just because you've received some bad feedback, or you've received feedback that you weren't expecting or that you didn't want, that doesn't mean that you're not still a good person. It doesn't mean you're any less of a designer, a policy writer, or a professional. That person is simply giving you that, hopefully, and I think should be giving you that feedback and critique to improve the work. And along those lines, I think it's also really important to remember that critique isn't the same as criticism. Critique should be constructive. It should be there, exactly as we've just said, to serve the work and improve the work. It is not an opportunity to do, as I say, go kind of full old school art school on people. Critique serves the work. It's not there to tear it up into tiny thousands of pieces, throw it into the fiery depths of 1980s art school. Many of you may have heard stories about work being ripped out of sketchbooks, thrown out of windows, torn up in front of students, things being shouted across journalism rooms for newspapers. This isn't what critique is about. Critique should be empowering, and it should make you feel energized to go away and make changes for the better, rather than to go hide and cry and feel generally very bad about yourself. I've got 6 top tips for giving critique, and then we have a fun exercise to put some of those into practice. So looking at number 1, being specific with our critique. Being specific about the aspects of a piece of work that someone has been speaking about, not making generalized comments about the whole. It's really important that the person receiving critique knows exactly what you are talking about. They know exactly which bits of work you are referencing, and that it's very clear to them what the feedback is actually all about. Pop some examples in here. So this is, let's say we were, for whatever reason, we've just been presented the search page for Instagram. And, this is a familiar piece of feedback. Oh, this looks great. This is exactly what I had in mind. Maybe a client or a team member was saying that. But what do we do with that? I think it's actually much better if we're specific. So actually, what we might say instead is, I think this grid finds the right balance between giving me enough content so I'm engaged without becoming overwhelming. Great, we're being specific. We're talking about the grid. We're also starting to talk about why we think it's working well. Again, focusing on other parts. Hidden content at the bottom looks like it will encourage scrolling. Awesome, we're being specific. Suddenly, as a receiver, I can go away and I actually know, these are the things that were working well. Can we push them further? Or can we respond and work out what needs more work? Tip number 2, be concise. This is the thing I tend to fall foul of most, is not being concise. But it's really important when we're giving feedback is that we get to the point as quickly as possible, whether it's kind of positive praise or whether it's kind of constructive suggestions for improvement. Make your thoughts as clear as possible so that there's no room for confusion. Again, this is particularly common when we're kind of giving perhaps what could be perceived as negative, or we're trying to point out things that we don't work very well. We might sort of talk around the subject saying, but kind of this bit, not sure about this, perhaps maybe we could try, what about, just be clear. Perhaps if you've not understood something, rather than walking around that, just say, I'm afraid I didn't understand. Please, can you explain it again? Suddenly that's putting on the path, us all, on the path to success, than listening to someone ramble for 5 minutes and not make any points. Number 3, although I would say this is actually the most important one, be honest. Whilst we all want our work to be positively received, saying something is great when actually you think there are some fundamental flaws with what's going on isn't going to help anyone. Doesn't help you, doesn't help the people who are on the project. Ultimately, doesn't help those who will be using, interacting, or feeling the consequences of the work at the end. Honesty and candor is, for me, the most fundamental part of any critique session. We're going back to 1998 with Word. Imagine if someone in that session had said, it works, covers all the features, I love it. When actually you're saying, oh wow, it might cover all the features, but it's simply too confusing. It's a small change, but suddenly we've gone from maybe being nice to what's being honest and actually most kind to the project. Number 4, know why, and let the receiver of the feedback know why you feel something is or isn't working. I think by providing kind of this reasoning to your critique, not only does it give receivers a clearer path towards making corrective action, making improvements, you know what, it also makes them kind of see your perspective, and suddenly it gives your feedback more credibility, rather than it moves from just being a quick opinion to something that you've thought through and is well reasoned, and again is all fuel the creative process. So again, it's not about saying, I love it. You know, you can still start with that, but tell someone why. So maybe it's this vase. It's not just that I love it, but it's because it's got a great texture. It brings warmth. This is an IKEA vase. Brings warmth to kind of a form that might be otherwise heavy and imposing. You're confident that it's going to fit into any environment, minimalist or ornate. It's the same feedback. You've just expanded, and suddenly I've gone from feeling good to feeling good and having something to work on. Or at least a way that I can learn and improve is like, great, I nailed this. This was the reaction I wanted. This is the reaction I've got. Or even someone said they've loved it. They've given me a reason. And that's totally the opposite of what I was trying to deliver with the work. Number 5, perhaps the most contentious of my 6 points, skipping the solutions. And in some situations, I don't think this is necessarily right. When you're being collaborative, when you're in workshops and we're all ideating and brainstorming together, the space is there for solutions. But if we framed a critique session purely to get feedback, then for me, if you're giving that feedback, then try and avoid being overly prescriptive. View it as your job to highlight the areas that need a closer look. If you're an expert in the area, then give your expert input, but don't assume that you necessarily know everything about what's best for the project, especially if you've not been particularly close to the work. For example, that look at the metal logo, using that old cliche of, we think we should make the logo bigger. Actually, just say your thoughts rather than jumping to that solutions. I think the logo looks a little small. It's hard to read, difficult to find amongst the other content. Suddenly, this feedback has context and it's got information we can work on. The last one. Actually, I often find the best form of giving critique is to just ask questions. Not everything you say needs to be a defined statement. You can empower people to explore things by asking them questions. And I think on top of that, if you don't understand something, don't guess. Don't guess what the person meant. Ask questions. Ask them to clarify. You don't need to fill silence, and I've experienced in many workshops people just trying to fill silence by saying things, trying to be clever. Ask questions to the person giving the feedback. Did you mean this? What do you mean by this? What do you think? What do you think is strong? Where do you think the improvements are that can be made? Put the power back in their hands and start a bit of a discussion. What I'd love to do now is run a little game that I call Critique the Uncritiquable. Let's close this down, and I'm going to bring up a Miro board. So I think it's often said, and where this game comes from is I think there can often be ideas. I'm hoping someone can kind of come to, I can't bring everyone to me, Anna Maria, if you're able to bring everyone to you and show everyone the whole board, that would be great. I think it's often seen, there are things we just can't give feedback on, but my view is everything is open for critique. Everything can receive feedback. There is always something you can say, ask, or do when someone's presented a piece of work to you. So I like to pick a handful of things that are generally accepted as being the pinnacle of their field. And so we've got 5 of them here. We've got the Nike swoosh, often believed in graphic design to be incredible. We've got the original IMAX. We've got St. Paul's Cathedral. We've got the Google search page, and we've got Helvetica, the typeface or font. Sorry, never know which one. Don't want to upset any graphic designers with that. And I would love for you for the next 4 minutes to think about what you said and just put yourself in the shoes of, we were in the first critique session where this design was revealed. Someone's gone, this is what we've got. What would you say, ask, or do in this situation? how would you deal with one of these most challenging critique environments? I can see lots of you on the Nike. Feel free to move to the right and you'll see some of the other options. And we can enjoy the happiest butter alive music. I also appreciate that this is deliberately very difficult because you have no context. Just putting two images in front of you and going, critique it. Just a minute left. I can see some great examples of being specific, being concise, asking questions, being honest. There's lots of honesty on the Helvetica typeface. Once we've wrapped up, I'll pick out some and maybe get some reactions on how easy or difficult you found this challenge. I always think the buzzer is a bit more of an aggressive timer end in butter. I don't know if the butter crew would agree with me. Wonderful stuff, everyone. It's great to see lots of different things in there. I'm just going to pull out a few as we move around the board. So looking at the Nike swoosh, I love this question on, does the swoosh mean you're always right in all that you do? And what makes you feel that? It's great. Suddenly when you're presented with a piece of work that doesn't have much context, you will begin to ask all sorts of questions. We've got people kind of nice specific feedback. The variation in line thickness shows movement and perspective. Great. Maybe if that's what the designer was looking for, they will resonate with that and say a job well done. that isn't what they wanted to deliver, suddenly they've got something which they can take and improve on. Why have you used this shape from Greek mythology? Not sure where to begin there, but again, great question to ask as a bit of critique. This has made me feel a certain way. Have you considered it? What does this question prompt you to do next? The curve is not slender enough. Again, being specific. We're not just talking about the logo or the mark. We're being very specific about the elements we want to give feedback on. Looking through the iMac. Looks like a children toy, I suppose, is it framed as a question. Wouldn't necessarily say that is a question, but it's a very specific, candid piece of feedback. You know, if it wasn't meant to look like a children's toy, maybe there is work to be done in the eyes of that critiquer. Critique around it taking up a lot of space for people with small offices and apartments. Again, being specific, great. St. Paul's Cathedral, in my opinion, the most difficult one to provide any critique to, but that might just be my own affinity to it. And I love this question around it costs a lot. Are there other ways we can use these resources? It's turning the entire situation on its head, making us think differently about the work that is being produced. I really do think questions are such a key and underutilized way of giving feedback. But it's not just about giving feedback, right? There are always two parties in a critique session. Yes, there is the person who's presented their work, but there is also, yes, there are other people giving their feedback, but there is also the person, in this case it's you, who is doing the presenting. You have created the work, and whether you're presenting it in a real-time session or whether you've put it up for some asynchronous review in something like Miro or Figma, or even on corkboards around the office, for those of us who do still venture into the office. I actually think one of the biggest things we can do to generally improve critique is to improve how we receive it and to improve how receptive we are and how we structure this part of critique. Actually, I think people generally are quite good at giving critique, certainly in the fields that we're often in. But I think we can be a lot better at receiving it. And again, I've got 5 top tips for this as well. Number 1, most important, feedback is a gift. It is incredibly easy to get defensive, blame people, shirk off anything that might be viewed as slightly negative or finds flaws, finds faults, pick holes, questions your work. Let it settle. Listen to what people say. Take it as a gift. Don't rush to your conclusions. Try not to react instantly. It's a gift. Feedback is a gift. And I think this is actually when we're talking about butter and we're talking about remote teams and working remotely, I actually think the remote shifts, and certainly the shifts we've seen over the past couple of years, have done wonders for being able to receive critique better, because doing it remotely, doing it asynchronously is great. When you're not in a heated room with other people giving you feedback, it's much easier to take time to reflect on what's being said. You see comments, you can read them, you can digest them. It's perfect for it. If you want to make receiving critique easier, make the process a bit longer. Don't force everyone to have reactions or opinions within a matter of moments of seeing the work for the first time. But like I say, don't react. Don't get angry. What do you mean? What do you mean you don't think this color is the right color? I've put loads of effort into this piece of work and I think you're wrong. Everything you said is wrong and you are just generally not doing well. I don't trust anything you say. Don't do that. Thank you for your feedback. Let's reflect on it and see how we could move forward. Let's let the dust settle and go from there. Number 2, ask clarifying questions. Sometimes the people looking at your work don't understand things. They say things and you don't understand what they're saying. Suddenly we're in this vicious circle of confusion. So whilst I do say feedback is a gift, let it reflect. Do by all means ask clarifying questions. Ask the person to provide more detail. Ask them to expand on it. Understand where they're coming from. Understand the reasons for their critique. This is the flip of it being really important to tell someone why you have formed the opinion you have formed. This is about getting it out of them if they don't do it naturally. very, very simple ways of reflecting this back, questions back to the person. Could you elaborate a little? Tell me why you think that. What isn't working for you? Which bit in particular? Why? What are you referring to specifically? You as a receiver of the feedback can facilitate people and encourage people to be concise and be specific and be honest with you. It's really important to have an open mind. I often say that both expertise and naivety have a really valuable role in critique. We love people who are experts in domains, but we also love people who have a beginner's mind and who might bring us different perspectives. As we've just seen in Critique the Uncritiquable, suddenly you can kind of open different dimensions and see things from a different angle. So it's really important for you when you're receiving feedback to listen to what everyone has to say, not just the most important people in the room, not just the people with the biggest voices, because you might be surprised of some of the new directions that it'll inspire within you. Your mind will be opened, and in some cases it could be blown. I've been in situations where the person who perhaps knew the least about the project has said something that's inspired the most important and valuable change to the work. Number 4, and again, this is a great thing about working remotely and asynchronously with people, is that guide the process. You going into any kind of feedback situation is likely to know which specific elements you want feedback on. Ask the audience, whoever that might be, clients, stakeholders, your team, users, ask them specific questions when you need specific answers. Now, this isn't an excuse to run away from what you think might be the weaker elements, to only ask questions about the things you're really confident on. Actually, it's an opportunity to ask questions about what you're least confident on. What do you have a hunch needs improvement, but you're just stuck in a bit of a block? Ask questions and guide the process. Again, when you're using remote tools, when we're using digital tools, or even if we're running through a presentation, slot these points in, right? If we've got a screen, let's say it's this glucose monitoring app, be specific about what we want. In this session, I want you to talk to me about how legible the icons are. Do they match up with the section title? And what do you think about the grouping? This is what I want your feedback on today. I don't need to be overwhelmed with other thoughts. There's another time and another place for them. Let's deal on what's blocking me as a creator at this point in time. And lastly, I think a thing we often forget, again, it's a thing students forget all the time from my kind of time as lecturers and tutors, it's really important to have your own opinion. Ultimately, you or your close-knit group of team members is going to have to decide on what feedback you do and don't care about. Everything is up for interpretation. You will often get feedback that pushes and pulls you in different directions. Have your own opinion on where you think you should go next. Use your own instinct, use your own expertise, and be willing to challenge what people have fed back to you. Often you know the work best, you know the project best, you know the context best. So it is fine to have these creative discussions. What I would also say is probably shouldn't ignore what every single person says just because you've got a particular opinion. It's a fine and tricky balance to find. But often situations can end like this. It's all about compromise, thanking people for their feedback, acknowledging that you've been able to make some really great small tweaks, but actually use those testing outcomes, give us confidence that we're on the right track generally. Let's check in again soon. Keep progressing and keep pushing the projects forward. Now, I don't have an activity to run us through on this one, except I would very much welcome your critique and feedback on what you've just heard, questions it's inspired within you, thoughts within you, any pushback, any disagreements. I would love to see them in the chat. I'm going to listen to receiving feedback. Rule number 1, it's a gift. I'm going to enjoy it. If you praise me, it's going to make me feel good and make the rest of my day go well. But I would love to hear any more constructive feedback and critique you can give me. Otherwise, I'm going to hand right back on time to Anna Maria to close us out.
I build a bit of suspense there. Thank you so much, Will. I took a couple of notes. yeah, we still have 4 more minutes. So I would like to maybe use this time and see if indeed anyone here has anything, any questions. It can be a question, it can be a thought to something that we just learned together. It can be just a bounce back of something. It can be a half-formed thought that you're putting into the room. Feel free to pop it in the chat or to queue yourself up. Jing is already adding her feedback, and I'm giving the word to Ajay.
Hi. Just want to check in a remote workplace wherein people don't have that connect with each other and they have not built that rapport with each other to a large extent. Then how difficult it is to provide critical feedback and what can be taken care of while giving feedback in this situation.
Great question. I think it is a really important one, because I think a lot of what I've spoken about is much easier in environments where trust has been built, community has been built. And I'd say it comes back to, for me, it comes back to, and I'd love to hear other people's thoughts, it comes back to the fact that it's kind of a two-way dynamic, and this idea that the feedback being given is there to serve the work, not the person, right? It kind of requires collective agreement from everyone in an environment to say, look, draw a box around your feedback session and say, we're now in a time for feedback. It's a safe space. Be as honest and as open as you can, whether you think it's going to sound positive or negative, so that everyone knows that we're all providing these thoughts to improve the work. It's very much, for me, about trying to build kind of that environment and view and giving permission. And I think as people who need to receive feedback, often the most important thing we can do is give permission to others to say what they really mean to us, because then hopefully the challenge of people not wanting to offend us is at least dampened, if not removed entirely. I think often we don't give enough due responsibility to the people receiving feedback to make it easy for people. If you're always defensive, then people are going to struggle to give you feedback. And so it's about training yourself to receive it well as much as it is training yourself to give it well.
Okay. So do you feel that there has to be a well-agreed social contract among all the employees that this is the way that the feedback should be given or asked? Something around that?
I think for me, it's not really, I guess a social contract sounds quite intense, but like for me, it's just kind of ground rules of the session, making it clear when when these sessions begin, when they end, and kind of have some ground rules that everyone can abide by and buy into and kind of agree upon. And then I guess, yeah, it is a social contract of like, this is what happens in critique. It's all important. We've all agreed to it. And so hopefully some of those barriers are reduced. Practice as well. Practice is really important in these environments.
All right. Thank you so much, Will, for the awesome tips. I won't let you go without landing into our own reality. What is the one thing you've learned today, you've heard today, that really stuck with you and you are planning to experiment with, give it a try next time you give or receive critique? So this is, I'm taking something that Will said and I am committing to myself to test it out and play along with that and see how that will shape that conversation next time. The poll is open for you to add your thoughts. I have also added the next Collab Fest link. It's starting in 15 minutes. We're going to be with Natalie Pierce, and she's talking about turning culture into your remote team's competitive advantage. And Mark, we are sending a virtual goodie bag with all the recordings. There are a bunch of discounts and other really cool freebies from all of our speakers. So then maybe we can get a final cheat sheet as a recap for the session, for the question panel, for Mark to print out and stick next to his his desk. Awesome. Loving absolutely your questions here, your reflections here. Be specific. Critique is empowering. Critique is not criticism. Yes. Give more feedback, a gift. Beautiful. Thanks, everyone. See you in 15 minutes, Natalie. Will wish you a beautiful rest of the day. And thank you so much for the awesome session. See you all soon.